All right, we'll go ahead and get started. So first and foremost, hello and welcome everyone. I'm Kabliya Tao with the University of Minnesota Alumni Association and your host for today. I'm absolutely delighted to have everyone here for our Run virtual event. This event is really for runners at every level and a kickoff event for those who have registered for the BTN Big 10K. Traditionally, the Big 10K has been held in Chicago, and we've had devoted Chicago Gophers representing the University of Minnesota for many years in the run. However, due to COVID-19, the race is virtual this year, giving Gophers living anywhere the opportunity to participate. Today's event is truly to provide information about how to run safely during this pandemic and to hear tips from fellow runners. So we do have a full hour of content, so let me walk you through what our program will look like today. We will begin today with two informative presentations, one from Dr. Christopher Lundstrom and the other from Dr. Mark Pereira. I'll ask you to hold questions for both presenters until we move into our panel portion. During our panel portion, Dr. Lundstrom and Dr. Pereira will be joined by two runners, Sarah Moser and Amanda Rodriguez. Before we get started, I just have two housekeeping items, which are, please note that today's event is being recorded and will be shared with other alumni and friends at a later date. And then lastly, to allow everyone to have an enjoyable time, please kindly keep your mics muted to eliminate any interruptions or background noise. All right, so it is my pleasure to introduce you to our first speaker today, Dr. Christopher Lundstrom. Dr. Lundstrom's research interest centers on endurance exercise training and performance. Specifically, he is interested in running economy, aerobic capacity, metabolic substrate utilization, and heart rate variability. He has been teaching at the University of Minnesota since 2006, including courses in the areas of sports science, training theory, coaching, and physical education. His interest in sports science can be traced back to his own career as a runner. His athletic highlights include placing third and fourth in the USA Marathon Championships and representing the United States in the 2007 Pan American Games and the World Mountain Running Championship in 2010. He has been coaching distance running since 1999 and has worked with runners of all levels, elite runners, high school, collegiate, and recreational. Currently, he is the head coach of Team USA Minnesota, an elite development program for professional distance runners. Dr. Lundstrom, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you. I'm going to just share my screen here and get going. So here we go. And all right. Okay, so thanks for the introduction. I have been a lifelong runner and very much an enthusiast of the sport. So my role is to just talk a little bit, introduce the idea of is it okay to run during the pandemic? Talk a little bit, I'll give you a hint. The answer is yes, but Dr. Pereira will give you some great tips on how to do that safely. Talk a little bit about route selection, where you're going to run, and then a bit about running etiquette as well, particularly important in this time. And then I will touch on running and immune function, as well as talk a little bit about nutrition and hydration around running specifically. So again, spoiler, yes, you can run during a pandemic. And, you know, a lot of people get into running for health benefits. Most people end up developing a love of the activity, but those health benefits are what attract a lot of us to running. So I've listed a number of the benefits of aerobic exercise, of which running is an example. So reduced risk of cardiovascular disease, reduced risk of some types of cancer, reduced risk of diabetes, and then we have improved blood pressure and cholesterol levels, as well as improved body composition and body weight. So the reason I kind of bring these benefits up right off the bat is what we're learning about COVID-19 is that while we are all at risk, people at higher risk of mortality include those who are obese, suffering from cardiovascular disease, diabetes, individuals with cancer, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. So in other words, some of those things that running and aerobic exercise can protect you from are things we really want to be avoiding in this time as well. So that being said, being fit does not make you immune to COVID-19. It does reduce the risk of some of the more severe outcomes, but very important to keep in mind that no one is immune. There are examples of very fit people who have really suffered and even died from the disease. So really important to get out there, stay aerobically fit. And so hopefully that's why you're all tuned in today. You're excited to be doing so. So specifically to the 10K event, for those of you who are going to be participating in the BTN 10K, just a few things to keep in mind ahead of time. It's a great idea to have sort of a course mapped out ahead of time. And there are a lot of tools, online mapping tools that you can use to kind of set up a route that's going to work for you. And then most people running today have their nice GPS watch or some other app on their phone where they can track distance so that you can get a relatively accurate measure of the course. In terms of deciding where you're going to run, you know, it's a good idea to kind of scope out and think about when is a time of day where you can get on a route that's not going to be too crowded, and that will allow for safe social distancing. Those of us who are in the Twin Cities, you know, the park board has closed down a number of the parkways to cars so that we can actually use the roadways, which is really nice, although I believe that will be coming to an end fairly soon as well. So, but anyway, be thinking ahead and choose a route that's going to allow you safe social distancing. And just to kind of touch on a little bit of etiquette, I've been out running most days during the pandemic, and you know, I think it's perfectly normal to expect that people are going to be in a different state of mind. People might be awfully sensitive to anybody coming anywhere near them. And whether or not you're particularly worried for yourself, just understanding that other people are very concerned. And so give people as much space as possible. You know, I have seen examples of runners and bikers really kind of zipping by too close to other pedestrians. And that just tends to get people worked up. And so just be extra considerate, you know, go out of your way to make sure you're giving people more than ample space. And Dr. Pereira will talk a little bit more about exactly what that means. But one of the key things there is avoiding group runs. You know, the idea of doing these socially distanced group runs is appealing, but very quickly, when you're giving adequate space to each other, you're going to be taking over the entire roadway, or if you're on a bike path, you know, there's no room for anybody else. So avoiding those group runs. If you live with somebody who also runs, that's a great, you know, great way to get out and exercise together. But staying away from those larger group activities. All right, so running an immune function. One of the things that we know about aerobic exercise is that it can improve immune function, and there may be a variety of reasons why that occurs, but one thing is your body temperature actually goes up a little bit while you're exercising, and just like when you have a fever, that actually can help kill off some bacteria. And then we've got increased circulation of white blood cells. And then the last piece I think is really important, are decreased stress hormones when we're at rest. So when we go out and exercise, we have this big burst of stress hormones that are released, and that helps get our heart rate going and get our metabolic rate up, and get the fuel that we need into our circulation. But after we stop, if you're a chronic aerobic exerciser, your stress hormones at rest are going to be lower. And that's tied to all sorts of positive health outcomes. And frankly, you just feel a little better if you've got lower levels of those stress hormones. The caveat to this is that high intensity and or longer duration exercise can cause a temporary compromise to your immune system. So some of you may have heard of the phenomenon of people running a marathon and getting upper respiratory tract infection in the week or so afterwards. That is actually quite common. And so really the key is knowing yourself. What is a long duration, high intensity mean for you? And it doesn't mean that you can't do that at all, but be very kind of mindful about when you're planning those types of activities. You certainly, if you know that you're going to be in a situation where you're exposed to other people, you need to fly somewhere for example, make sure that you're not doing those harder, higher intensity workouts around those types of events. One thing that you can do to sort of mitigate that effect is to ingest some carbohydrates during a prolonged effort. So I'll talk a little bit about that in the next slide, but if you're not getting so depleted of energy stores, you're going to help preserve your immune function. So just some tips, nutrition and hydration, to kind of finish up my section here. You want to start out your run well-fueled. Goes kind of without saying. You don't, leave for your road trip with an empty tank of gas. Same thing with your run. You want to make sure that you're well-fueled. We store carbohydrates in the form of glycogen in our muscles and in our liver. Liver helps maintain our blood sugar levels. And so you want to make sure you've got a good store of glycogen before you start your run. If you're getting up and running first thing in the morning, it's helpful to have a snack or a small breakfast to kind of make up for the stores that you've used overnight. And then hydration as well. Obviously it's been hot. It's kind of a heat index day today to be aware of. So make sure you're staying hydrated and sipping water throughout the day. And then, so I mentioned the benefits of taking in some fuel during your run. If you're running, what do I mean by prolonged? Well, over an hour, maybe. Definitely if you're going over 90 minutes, then you want to be taking in fluid and fuel during your run. So guidelines, roughly 8 to 16 ounces per hour. It's going to obviously vary depending on the weather conditions and your own sweat rate and things like that. One guideline that's out there is to just use your thirst as a gauge. So drink more if you're feeling thirsty, back off if you're not feeling thirsty. For those longer efforts, choosing a sports drink rather than just water can help to obviously bring in some carbohydrate as well, but also those sports drinks have electrolytes, sodium, chloride, potassium, that you're losing in your sweat, sodium in particular. And that helps with absorption as well. In terms of energy to bring in during a prolonged effort, the guidelines are, again, pretty broad because we have different body sizes, different tolerances, but roughly 150 up to 400 calories per hour. Most people running have a hard time taking in that higher end of the range, but certainly 150 at a minimum per hour. And the easiest thing to absorb is just a simple carbohydrate, so sugar, sports drink, anything like that, energy gels, are just the quickest thing to be absorbed and used during exercise. After your run, you want to finish off and get something in your system within 30 minutes of finishing your run. Ideally, you want something with a roughly 4-to-1 carb to protein ratio, and that will help aid your recovery and leave you feeling better the rest of the day and better for your next run or workout, whenever that may be. Again, maintaining that hydration. It's an imperfect test, but you can look at your urine color, and if your urine is light to pale colored or clear, you're probably pretty well hydrated. Try to avoid excessive amounts of caffeine, alcohol, things that are going to lead you to dehydration. And then maintaining a balanced diet throughout the day. You know, I'm not here to give everybody nutrition guidance, but for the most part, diet that's high in fruits, vegetables, and focuses on unprocessed foods. So with that, I will pass it along.
All right, thank you, Dr. Lundstrom. I'm certain there are some follow-up questions for you as well, but as I mentioned at the start, please hold questions until we transition to our runners panel. With that being said, I'd like to introduce you to our next speaker, Dr. Mark Pereira. Dr. Pereira is a professor in the Division of Epidemiology and Community Health. His research focuses on the cause and epidemiology of type 2 diabetes, which is costly, debilitating, and a prevalent disease, yet it is highly preventable. His interest has long been steeped in the role of physical activity and nutrition in the prevention of type 2 diabetes and related cardiometabolic risk factors. Because of their close relation to type 2 diabetes, his work also involves investigations into obesity and cardiovascular disease. Dr. Pereira, please feel free to start your presentation.
Okay, thank you for the introduction and the invitation to be on the panel today. I'll start out with this nice picture before the pandemic of Dr. Fauci running without a mask on. And this is what I'll be covering in the next 15 minutes. Where to run, location, that's a big question, right? Who to run with, if anybody. And then a lot about preparation of hygiene and masks. And I'll give you a lot of information to help you with those protocols. I'm going to talk about the slipstream. What is the slipstream and how to avoid it? This is extremely important, and the science is emerging, but I feel like we know enough right now to really pass on some information on the slipstream. A little bit on cross-training at the end, because that's important too. So where to run, inside or out? We might have a knee-jerk reaction that, oh, outside's going to be better, but it really kind of depends. If you're running alone inside with equipment that's sanitized and not shared, maybe that's going to be better than outside. So it's pretty complicated. If you're running outside, as we've heard, you want to run where you're not near a lot of people, and that can be difficult. So you really have to put some thought into where you're going to run. I'm going to go over a number of hygiene tips for preparation for running outside and inside. I wouldn't run with more than one partner. It's preferable to run alone. This is all, of course, advice for the COVID pandemic and running in this situation. And avoiding the slipstream, which we'll go into some detail on. There's a safe physical distancing radius when we are standing or near people, which is to be at least 6 feet apart. We're all familiar with that. But what is it when you're running? If you're side by side, the 6 foot separation probably still holds, at least 6 feet. because the slipstream is basically behind you, and that's where there's the potential contamination area. So we'll go into some detail on that. So you never want to run behind somebody. You want to move laterally around them when passing. And if you are behind them, you want to keep a safe distance. We'll go into some detail on that. Do not, be careful also about non-runners. Don't just run by pedestrians who are out there on the trails or on the street. You want to protect yourself and you want to protect them. So all the distancing stuff applies to any other human being that you're coming across, the distancing. And do not spit. We spit a lot when we run. Right now, that's going to be particularly hazardous because you don't know where it's going to land. It's obviously extremely, potentially a very large viral load that can land on some surfaces around the cities or wherever you're running. So in terms of running inside, the best bet, you're going to be on a treadmill, obviously. You want it to be private. If it's a shared treadmill, you need to be really careful about hygiene and sanitizing of the equipment. You really should avoid public gyms. I know that's really controversial right now, but in terms of the safest bet for avoiding transmission of this virus, you want to stay away from public places as much as possible. I think gyms are going to be particularly hazardous because of the increase in respiration and the deep breathing, which creates larger particles that are going to travel further, and it's particularly hazardous. So I would avoid that. And we're not really sure about what the filtration system is in some of these public buildings, which is a particularly important issue with the transmission. So here's a 10-point checklist for you. It's a lot on one slide, but since it's a checklist, you could just save it, print it off, and use it. Before your workout, do you need to take a thorough shower? What's your current hygiene status? You want to start the workout when you are, especially if you might be near other people, when you're really clean. Clean unused workout clothes, lace up your shoes, and put on your sanitized watch and phone. Prepare your sanitized water or fuel bottle if you're going to be using it. Try to have hand sanitizer or wipes available during your run or your workout. Apply that alcohol or sanitizer right at the start of your workout, when you would also sanitize any shared equipment that you might be using. Put on a mask, especially if you will not be alone or if using shared equipment. So if you're running on a nature path or in some kind of an environment where you're pretty sure you never see people out there, then the mask is not going to be as much of an issue. Otherwise, it's highly recommended. And do try not to touch your face, eyes, or nose while running. I say consider using goggles. I find it extremely difficult to not touch my face, eyes, and nose, especially when working out. And that would be, another reason to work out alone or to run alone. Because then if you're alone and you're touching yourself, it's not an issue. That's a tricky one. And then when your workout is complete, you got to sanitize all the equipment again, especially if it's shared equipment, and of course take a really good shower. And the best thing to do is have a reusable mask that then you could wash in hot soapy water and air dry, or use a throwaway mask, which you'll be using a new mask every time. So a little bit more on masks here. You may be aware that Under Armour has come out with a sports mask that is affordable and washable. And unfortunately, if you order one today, you might not get it until September, so you might want to hurry up and sign up for one of those. And there's a really good quote here by Dr. Duran of the LifeBridge Innovation at LifeBridge Health on wearing a mask. It's like a team sport. We're all in this together to do the best we can to be safe. So we should all be wearing masks, not just for ourselves, but for those around us. Now, does Dr. Fauci wear a mask while running? I'll show you a quick little interview about this, but first I want to make sure that you can hear it. Let's see here. Share computer sound. So you should be able to hear this when I play it. That's pretty good.
I'm a runner like you. Do you wear a mask when you run? You know, what I do, and to be honest with you, I put the mask on, and I will be, doing power walking, running, and usually in our neighborhood of Northwest DC, there aren't a lot of people out.
Right.
So when as you know, when you breathe in, it feels like you're waterboarding yourself.
Yeah.
So what I do is I leave it on. When I see that there's nobody within 100 feet of me, I might take it down and breathe regularly. When I see people coming, and there are people walking on the street, I put the mask back on so that when I'm way far from them, maybe 40 feet, 30 feet, 20 feet, as soon as I pass them and I'm alone again, I'll take it down a little. I think that's reasonable. You don't have to have it on if there's nobody around.
All right, back to presentation. So that was cool. Good.
Healthy people are being warned against using face masks to protect themselves against the virus. As Justine Conway explains, experts fear incorrect use could lead to more infection.
There, sorry about that. So now we're going to talk a little bit about the slipstream. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail. You can go to these links. This study has not been peer-reviewed yet, as far as I know, but it's a very good white paper, and it's trying to get out the results of this science on safe distancing while walking, running, and cycling. And there's a link here to the story on Medium and a lot of interesting discussion. And then there's a link here to this actual white paper. So it's a really well done simulation study. So they use computational fluid dynamics. What we need in the future is more like real life experimentation on this. But these data are valid, and we need more studies like this. So the question was, is 6 feet apart sufficient when you're walking, running, and cycling? Because it probably isn't, but what would the safe distance be? And so that was what they did with these simulations. And they took into account the particle size. So the size of the droplets that you're exhaling in these experiments. So the droplet size range from 40 to 200 millimeters. And when a person is moving, there's the slipstream is the wake behind the person where all these particles are traveling. And if you're moving, they're going to be going on average more than 6 feet. It depends on how fast you're moving. And this study was done in the absence of wind. So we need to take into account how to adjust to wind in the future. So keep that in mind. And so they found out that if people are side by side, walking, running, or cycling, in the absence of wind, at least 6 feet apart is okay. The droplets are going behind them and they're spreading out a little bit, but 6 feet apart at minimum would be safe. But if person B is positioned in the slipstream or wake of person A, then this person, the question is how far behind person A should they be? So how far should Galen Rupp here be behind Meb if they're running in COVID? What they found out in these studies is that the safe physical distances are 5 meters if you're walking fast. So what's that, about 15 feet? So now you're going to be 15 feet behind somebody if you're walking, no closer than that. 10 minutes if you're running fast, so about, 10 meters, so about 30 feet behind them. That's quite a ways. And then if you're cycling fast, you want to be at least about 60 feet behind the person. But the idea too is just don't be behind them. Offset yourself, think about the wind. And if you're going to be near somebody, you're better off being offset. If you're going to be behind them, consider these distances. Think about what Dr. Fauci said. He doesn't have to really pay a whole lot of attention to these actual numbers if his rule of thumb is 100 feet. The farther away, the better, right? So the implications and suggestions of this is you also have to think about, what are the issues with the wind? You have to be more careful with that, but these rules still apply. You just might want to think if there's a clear direction to the wind that you want to be on the upwind side so you're not in somebody's slipstream. And then when overtaking a person, you want to use these safe distances here that are shown for the different activities. And then you don't want to move back in front of that person until you're a safe distance in front of them. according to these numbers here. The organizations such as the CDC are looking for additional evidence, and so that they can have more refined recommendations on distancing in the future. So we're just kind of doing the best we can with the information that we have. Now I'll finish up with just a couple words on cross-training, because that's also really essential for everybody, and especially for runners, because otherwise they're only conditioning their lower body. And I would just use my hygiene mask recommendations checklists for cross-training as well. I would avoid the public gyms, keep the safe distances, and use all those proper practices with sanitization and so forth. And definitely wear a mask, especially if you're not going to be alone. So the bottom line is keep on running and doing physical activity during the COVID pandemic. But I really recommend that you really take seriously these recommendations, especially my 10-point checklist. There's a lot going on here with infectious disease transmission, and we really need to think and be organized in order to keep everybody safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Pereira. And now we are actually in the panel portion of today's virtual event. Dr. Lundstrom and Dr. Pereira will now be joined by friend of the university, Sarah Moser, and alumna Amanda Rodriguez. Sarah, can you take a moment to introduce yourself?
Hello, so I'm Sarah Moser. I attended the University of Minnesota from 2004 to 2007, but I actually transferred away to a school in Texas due to a change in major. But I say once a gopher, always a gopher. I didn't start running until 2014, and I actually hated running before that, but I randomly decided that I wanted to run a color run. So I started the Couch to 5K app, and then followed by the Couch to 10K app. And I ended up running several other runs, including a 10K, before I even ran my first color run. And several 10Ks later, including the 2017 BTN 10K, and several half marathons later, I'm now planning to complete the New York Roadrunners 9+1 program, which will qualify me for the 2021 New York City Marathon. And I would have never imagined running a marathon until recently. And even now it seems pretty daunting, but I'm determined.
Thank you, Sarah. And Amanda, can you share a little bit about yourself?
Sure. My name's Amanda Rodriguez. I'm actually the University of Minnesota Alumni Association's network leader for the greater New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut area. I graduated from the University of Minnesota in 2014 with a degree in sport management and double minors in mass communications and history. I, unlike Sarah, am a novice runner. I'm probably where she was in the 2014 time of I currently hate running. But due to the pandemic and snacking, I've come to realize that walking, yoga, circuit training just might not be cutting it. So this will be my first race of any kind. The virtual aspect of the Big 10K got me really excited because traveling to Chicago is obviously not an option anytime soon, so why not run with some fellow gophers? So I am excited.
Cool, thanks, Amanda. So to help today facilitate today's panel, please use the raise your hand option in the participants section, and I will then call on you to ask your question of our panel. Your question can be directed at all of our panelists or specifically to a panelist. And so please feel free to use the raise hand option. Anyone has a question? Oh, so I guess I will start. So actually, my first question, I like Amanda, I'm kind of new to running or to running this race. And, my question actually goes out to Sarah. And Sarah, I was just curious, how do you stay motivated? Because that's oftentimes what I'm finding is I'm not as motivated as I should be. So yeah, just my curiosity.
Well, for me, I need a reason to run. Even after running numerous races, I still don't want to run just for fun. I don't know if that will ever be me, honestly. I'm naturally kind of lazy. But when I have a race to train for, I follow a specific training guide, and that gets me to run. And then just being in the pandemic, I try and like do at least a few workouts a week just to keep myself kind of from snacking too much, like Amanda was saying. So.
Great. All right. And so Adam, do you have a question?
Yeah, so I have a question. I don't know if there's literature out there around this, but does the relative humidity significantly impact the slipstream based on the evaporation of some of those small particles, the water droplets?
I do not think we know the answer to that question, but I can ask some people who are more expert with that particular research. If you wanted to follow up with me, it's an excellent question. Though I would guess that it might even dampen the slipstream, but that's just an educated guess. That's a great question. I think there's a lot we don't know because a lot of it's based on simulations, and we need more real world studies, which are so hard to do.
All right. And then we have this one through chat to me, and this one goes out to Christopher and for anyone else as well too on the panel. What types of exercise can folks do before they run to better their running game?
Yeah, that's a good question. You know, most people just kind of charge out the door without doing any kind of a warm up, but it's a good idea to do some dynamic types of movements to get your body through the full range of motion, even just some walking high knees. So you're lifting your knee up high. So there's a whole bunch of dynamic kind of warm-up drills that, you know, you can basically do, you know, A skips, B skips, things like that. Even just a few walking lunges and things like that can help kind of get your muscles prepped for the workout. Obviously, just doing a few repetitions so it's not tiring you out, but just kind of activating those muscles before you start out.
Sarah or Amanda, do you guys have any tips on what you guys do before you guys go on your runs?
I have to admit, I don't do anything. I just go out and run like Christopher was saying.
I with a pretty big yoga practice, I try to at least stretch beforehand. Stretching before and after seems to help, especially with all this sitting that I've been doing while quarantining at home. My hips have been extremely tight. So I definitely try to stretch ahead of time. And then I actually live right near a park, so walking just to kind of get everything loose before I actually begin any running is definitely my tactic.
Very cool. And so this question is from Jill. Jill is says, I'm wondering about advice for running in heat and humidity. I try to run early in the morning, but it's still quite hot and humid where I am. And Mark or Chris, what do you guys have any suggestion?
Sure, yeah, I think definitely using the cooler part of the day as this person is doing, but also just knowing that you need to adjust your pace when it's very hot and humid. You know, maybe you wear a heart rate monitor and you can kind of go off of that, but also just go off of your perceived effort. If it feels like it's a lot harder that day, it's because it is. It's running in the heat is challenging. So slowing down, trying to stay in shaded areas if you can, so you're not in direct sunlight, but really just adjusting and going by effort. I always feel like when fall comes around, all of a sudden I feel like I'm in a lot better shape, but I haven't changed how fit I am. It's just that cool weather really makes a difference.
Okay. And then this question comes from Garrison. Garrison asks, regarding the 6 feet at rest or 10 feet when being active recommendations, are we to assume that these are recommendations based on having no mask or actually wearing a mask? This question, I suppose, is relevant for anything from riding or subway or jogging on Randall Island or in Central Park. Hint, not all of us live in Northeast or Northeast DC like Dr. Fauci.
That's a great question. It's for not wearing a mask, because the simulations are based on what's coming out of your mouth, the particle droplets. And so it's a really, really good question. I wish I addressed that. So theoretically, the slipstream should be far less of an issue, and depending on the type of mask, maybe no issue, but we should never assume that, because we don't know the type of masks, we don't know how people are wearing the masks. So this is the only information we have so far, the study that I showed. That is a really, really good question. One of the best approaches to managing the slipstream is to wear a mask. And it's not easy to wear a mask while running. So I just really like that little clip by Dr. Fauci. That's an excellent question.
All right, and our next question is going to go to John. John, great to see you. Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. My question has to do with somebody that's older. Like, I got my doctorate in psychology at the University of Minnesota in 1972. I'm 78 years old, and I try and exercise about 11 times a week. So I try and do weightlifting and legs half of the time and bottom part the other part of the time, weightlifting and stuff. But what, and And I've got AFib. What would you say for people that are older, people in their 70s, 80s? How does this stuff relate to somebody that's older?
Well,
How's running?
Yeah. So is the question COVID specific or more general about running?
Probably more general, but COVID is certainly a factor. I try and stay away from people.
Yeah. I just think that, with older age brackets and lots of the other chronic disease conditions that some people have that Chris listed, you have to just be even more judicious about the safety, the distancing, and the hygiene. It just becomes even more crucial for people who might be vulnerable, and you might fall into that category. That's what I would say. Other issues such as the humidity question, all those sorts of things that stress us physiologically, they're just at another level of precaution that needs to be used with older adults and people with underlying conditions. And I don't know if Chris wants to comment more on that.
Yeah, I think just maintaining the routine that you've established already is going to be would be my recommendation. It's maybe not necessarily the time to try to do pick up a new type of activity or increase what you're doing, but really maintaining what sounds like is a very healthy mix of activities. I think that's great.
Yeah, the cross training, becomes even more important with aging, and those of us in our 50s are already experiencing that. So I want to be like you when I'm in my 70s. And the cross training is a huge piece of successful aging.
All right, and then this question comes from Trina. Trina asks, do you think we will be back to live racing in 2021, or do you think it might be a bit longer? And when we do go back to live racing, what should we expect for safety protocols? Chris, do you or Mark have any insight on that?
Yeah, there are some very small events starting back up, kind of like elite level competitions where the protocols that USA Track and Field has put in place is they require a test 2 days before, and then basically immediately before the event. They're limiting fields to, I think, 10 people and no spectators allowed. So we're a long ways away from kind of what we think of as a traditional road race. And I think it's going to be a while yet. You know, I think there's people who are hoping that there's a vaccine in place before that happens. How long that takes is unknown. But I mean, I guess I would be hopeful that at some point in 2021 it's going to happen. But yeah, if I had a crystal ball, I'd be a very popular person right now.
I agree with that. I think having a vaccine would be critical for that timeline. But even without a vaccine, it's probably 2021 or later.
Great. And this question comes from Noel, and actually is a fantastic question that I would love the answer for as well too. As you run and your mask gets sweaty, is your mask still keeping you safe though it's damp? Is it still effective at that point?
As far as I know, that's an unknown. It's a great question. This is tricky stuff. Nobody wants to wear a mask when they're working out. I think what the best advice is to try to stay away from people, so that you could have your mask around your neck, and then you won't have to put it on so much. Then I suppose it could still get sweaty. We do not know the answers to these questions. We just have to do the best we can. And by the time we get the answers to these questions, the pandemic will probably be over, but we'll have more information for the next one.
All right, and this question comes from Adam. In terms of extreme long or extreme/long duration exercise contributing to a compromised immune system, is there any evidence of people testing COVID positive, asymptomatic, but developing complications due to stress/exercise? Is it risky to train for an ultra at this time?
I don't know the answer to that first question. My statements about immune function were not specific to COVID, so I do not know. And then the second question was, is it safe to train for an ultra event right now? You know, I think you have to pay attention to what your experience has been, and really, I think you want to make sure that you're not depleting yourself. So if you're training for a trail kind of ultra event and your training involves long sessions of maybe hiking / running, alternating, so you're taking in plenty of calories during it and you're not ending up in a really depleted state, then I think that would be a reasonable thing to do. Given, I think, Adam, you have some running background. So again, I wouldn't do it if this is your first rodeo, for sure.
And so in the chat, we also got a couple questions in regards to just more like if anyone has recommendations for the type of watch they should be purchasing, or if you have a lot of items on you, you don't like to carry bulky items. If anyone has any suggestions, Amanda or Sarah, do you guys have any recommendations, or even Chris or Mark?
I actually got a running watch back in May as an early birthday present, and I got the Garmin Forerunner 245, and I really love it. Before that, I was just using the Strava app on my phone to track my runnings, but now I'm not using my phone data, and then I just track the running on the phone, and then it syncs to Strava afterwards. So I really like that. They also have other versions that will play music, but I think you need like music subscriptions and things like that for that. So it wasn't something I needed, but there are so many different kinds, but I really like that one.
Cool. So with that, if anyone, does anyone else have any other questions? All right, I think that leads us kind of to our end here. And I hope that everyone had a wonderful time learning and are now more than ever motivated to get out there and run and just exercise in general. A special thank you to Dr. Lundstrom and Dr. Pereira, Sarah Moser, and Amanda Rodriguez for sharing their expertise and personal views with all of us today. And a special go Gophers to all the individuals who will be participating in the BTN Big 10K. Again, a lot of the information that was shared today, we recorded it, so we'll be sharing it on YouTube, and specifically some of the links that Dr. Pierre shared as well too, and his 10-point checklist. We'll be sending that in the follow-up email shortly after this. So thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you, Kalia.
Thanks, guys.